Rachel Monroe lay on the cold marble floor of her grand estate, staring blankly at the ceiling. Her chest did not rise. Her eyes did not blink. To anyone who walked into the room, she would have looked dead. And yet, somewhere deep inside her mind, Rachel was very much alive. She could feel everything, the chill of the floor beneath her back, the faint hum of the air conditioning, and most painfully, the burning sensation in her throat from whatever had been forced down it. She tried to move, but her body refused to obey. It was as if she were trapped in a prison made of flesh and bone, unable to speak, unable to cry out for help. Panic bubbled within her, but even that felt distant, muffled by the strange fog clouding her thoughts. Above her loomed Daniel Monroe, her husband of 10 years. He stood there, looking down at her with an expression Rachel couldn't quite place. Was it sadness, regret, or was it relief? His hands trembled slightly as he held onto a small glass vial, now empty. Rachel wanted to scream at him, to demand answers, but all she could do was watch as he carefully placed the vial on the nearby table. Daniel took a step back, running a hand through his neatly combed hair. For a moment, he just stared at Rachel's motionless form, his lips pressed tightly together. Then, without warning, he let out a shaky sigh and reached for his phone. "I need you here," he said into the receiver, his voice low and urgent. "It's done." Rachel's heart, or what remained of it, sank. Done? What exactly was done? Had he really gone through with it? Had he poisoned her? The thought sent waves of terror coursing through her, though her body gave no outward sign of distress. As Daniel paced the room, Rachel replayed the events leading up to this moment in her mind. Earlier that evening, they had attended a charity gala hosted by one of their business partners. Everything seemed normal, at least on the surface. Daniel had been charming as always, mingling with guests and making polite conversation. But Rachel had noticed the way he kept glancing toward Laura Bennett, his assistant and, unbeknownst to Rachel until recently, his mistress. Laura had stayed close to Daniel throughout the night, laughing at his jokes and brushing against him whenever possible. Rachel had seen enough to know something was going on between them, but she hadn't confronted him about it. Not yet. She had planned to wait until they got home, hoping to resolve things calmly. But clearly, Daniel had other plans. Now, as she lay paralyzed on the floor, Rachel realized the truth. This wasn't just about infidelity. This was about money. Her money. Over the years, she had amassed a considerable fortune through smart investments and hard work. Daniel, on the other hand, had squandered his own inheritance and relied heavily on Rachel's wealth to maintain their lavish lifestyle. If she were gone, he would inherit everything, and judging by the way he had orchestrated this accident, he clearly intended to share it with Laura. The sound of heels clicking against the marble snapped Rachel out of her thoughts. Laura entered the room, her blonde hair perfectly styled, her red dress clinging to her figure like a second skin. She stopped short when she saw Rachel lying on the floor, her blue eyes widening in shock, or perhaps feigned concern. "Oh my God," Laura whispered, covering her mouth with her hand. "Is she dead?" Daniel finished for her, his tone eerily calm. "Yes, it's finally over." Rachel wanted to lash out, to tell them both how wrong they were. She wasn't dead, she couldn't be, but try as she might, she remained trapped in this silent, immobile state. Laura approached cautiously, kneeling beside Rachel's body. She reached out hesitantly, pressing 2 fingers against Rachel's neck. After a few seconds, she pulled back, shaking her head. "There's no pulse," she said softly. "Are you sure this will hold up as an accident?" "It has to," Daniel replied tersely. "We'll say she overdosed. Pills, maybe. Stress, depression, they'll eat it up." Laura nodded slowly, though doubt lingered in her expression. "And what about us? What happens next?" "We wait," Daniel said firmly. "Once the dust settles, we'll disappear. Start fresh somewhere else. With her money, we can do anything we want." Rachel's blood boiled. Or at least it would have if she weren't currently incapacitated. How dare they talk about her like she didn't exist, like she was nothing more than a means to an end? But before she could dwell further on her anger, a strange sensation began to wash over her. It started as a tingling in her fingertips, spreading slowly up her arms and legs. Her vision blurred, and for a brief moment, she thought she might actually die. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the sensation stopped. Rachel blinked, her eyelids fluttering open. She gasped for air, her lungs burning as oxygen flooded back into them. Daniel and Laura froze, their faces masks of pure horror. They stared at her as if she were some kind of ghost rising from the grave. Rachel? Daniel stammered, taking a step backward. Rachel sat up slowly, her muscles stiff and uncooperative. She looked at her hands, flexing her fingers experimentally. Then she turned her gaze to Daniel and Laura, her expression unreadable. For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the steady ticking of the clock on the wall, marking the passage of time. Finally, Rachel broke the silence. "What's the matter, Daniel?" she asked, her voice hoarse but steady. "You look like you've seen a ghost." The funeral service for Rachel Monroe was held in a small but elegant church on the outskirts of town. It was a place she had always loved, known for its quiet charm and beautiful stained glass windows that painted the walls with colors when the sun shone through them. Today, however, the skies were gray, matching the mood inside the church. Mourners filed in slowly, their faces etched with sadness, or so it seemed. Rachel watched silently from the back of the room, hidden behind a pillar. She had decided to wait until everyone was seated before making her entrance. After all, this wasn't just any ordinary day, it was her funeral. And she had no intention of staying buried. As she observed the crowd, Rachel noticed familiar faces, friends, colleagues, distant relatives, all gathered to pay their respects. Some cried softly into handkerchiefs while others whispered condolences to one another. But there were two people who caught her attention more than anyone else. Daniel Monroe, her husband, and Laura Bennett, his mistress. They stood close together near the casket, pretending to grieve like everyone else. Daniel looked pale, his usual confident demeanor replaced by what appeared to be genuine distress. He kept glancing around the room, his eyes darting nervously, as though expecting something or someone to appear. Laura, on the other hand, seemed almost bored. She leaned against him casually, occasionally brushing her fingers against his arm in a way that suggested intimacy rather than comfort. Rachel clenched her fists tightly, fighting the urge to march up to them right then and there. Instead, she took a deep breath and reminded herself why she was here. This was about more than revenge, it was about exposing the truth. When the time felt right, Rachel stepped out from behind the pillar and began walking down the aisle. Every pair of eyes turned toward her, widening in shock as they realized who she was. Whispers rippled through the congregation like waves crashing against a shore. "Is that... It can't be. She's supposed to be dead." Rachel ignored the murmurs, keeping her focus on the front of the church where Daniel and Laura stood frozen. As she approached the casket, she glanced inside briefly, noting how peaceful she looked lying there. For a moment, she wondered what it must have been like for others to see her lifeless body. Did they truly believe she was gone? Or did some part of them suspect otherwise? Reaching the front of the room, Rachel turned to face the crowd. Her presence alone commanded silence. No one dared to speak or move, unsure of what to make of this ghostly figure standing before them. Daniel finally found his voice, though it came out shaky and strained. "Rachel, is that really you?" "Yes, Daniel," Rachel said calmly, meeting his gaze without flinching. "It's me." Laura let out a nervous laugh, breaking the tension, if only slightly. "This isn't possible," she muttered, shaking her head. "We saw you. You were... dead?" Rachel finished for her, raising an eyebrow. "Well, I'm not. Clearly." Her words hung in the air, sharp and undeniable. Daniel swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing as he struggled to find an explanation. Meanwhile, Laura shifted uncomfortably. Beside him, her confidence wavering. Rachel didn't give them time to recover. Turning to address the rest of the mourners, she spoke clearly and deliberately. I know many of you are wondering what happened. Let me assure you I'm just as surprised as you are to be standing here today. What I do know is that someone very close to me tried to end my life, and succeeded, for a little while, at least. Gasps erupted throughout the church, followed by hushed conversations. People exchanged incredulous looks, unsure whether to believe Rachel or dismiss her as delusional. Daniel stepped forward, attempting to regain control of the situation. Rachel, sweetheart, you've obviously been through something traumatic. Why don't we sit down and talk about this later? There's no need to cause a scene now. Oh, but there is, Rachel countered, her tone firm. Because while I was lying there, dead apparently, you two were busy planning your future, together. Am I wrong? Her accusation hit its mark, leaving Daniel speechless. Laura, however, wasn't ready to back down. You're insane, she spat, crossing her arms defiantly. You have no proof of anything. Rachel smiled faintly, a hint of triumph in her expression. Don't worry, Laura. I'll get to the truth soon enough. For now, though, let's just say I'm grateful to still be alive, and even more grateful that I returned in time to see this little performance firsthand. With that, Rachel turned and walked out of the church, leaving behind a stunned audience. Outside, she paused for a moment, taking in the fresh air and allowing herself a small sense of satisfaction. She had made her point, and planted the seeds of doubt in everyone's minds. Back inside the church, chaos erupted. Mourners bombarded Daniel and Laura with questions, demanding answers neither of them could provide. Daniel tried to defend himself, insisting that Rachel was confused or hallucinating, but his excuses fell flat. Laura, realizing the situation, was spiraling out of control, slipped away unnoticed, disappearing into the crowd. As the commotion continued, Rachel climbed into her car and drove home. She knew this was only the beginning. While today's events had shaken things up, there was still much work to be done. She needed evidence, solid proof of Daniel and Laura's crimes, if she hoped to bring them to justice. Over the next few days, Rachel threw herself into uncovering the truth. She scoured her house for clues, searching drawers, cabinets, and even Daniel's study. At first, she found nothing unusual, just bills, receipts, and mundane paperwork. But then, tucked away in a locked drawer, she discovered something shocking: a series of emails between Daniel and Laura. The messages revealed everything: their plan to kill her, their scheme to embezzle funds from her company, and their dreams of running off together once they had her fortune. Reading through them, Rachel felt a mix of anger and vindication. She had suspected as much, but seeing it written in black and white confirmed her worst fears. Armed with this new information, Rachel reached out to an old friend, Emily Carter, a private investigator with a knack for solving difficult cases. Emily listened intently as Rachel explained what had happened, her brow furrowing with concern. This is serious stuff, Rachel, Emily said when Rachel finished speaking. If these emails are real, Daniel and Laura could be looking at serious jail time. But we'll need more than just digital evidence. We need witnesses, documents, anything that ties them directly to your attempted murder. I understand, Rachel replied, nodding resolutely. And I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make sure they pay for what they've done. Together, Rachel and Emily devised a plan. They would gather as much evidence as possible, building a case strong enough to take down Daniel and Laura, once and for all. In the meantime, Rachel decided to play along, pretending to have no memory of the events leading up to her supposed death. This gave her the perfect opportunity to observe, gather intel, and bide her time until the moment was right. As the days turned into weeks, Rachel found herself reflecting on her marriage and the person she had become during those years with Daniel. She realized she had stayed with him out of fear, afraid of being alone and unwilling to admit that something was terribly wrong. Now, free from his influence, she vowed never to let anyone manipulate her again. Little did Daniel and Laura know their days of scheming were numbered. Rachel Monroe was back and she wasn't going anywhere. Rachel spent the next few weeks working tirelessly to piece together the puzzle of her attempted murder. Every day she woke up with one goal in mind: uncovering the truth about Daniel and Laura. Her house became both her sanctuary and her battlefield. During the day, she would act as if nothing was wrong, pretending to have forgotten the events that led to her supposed death. But at night, when everyone else thought she was asleep, Rachel transformed into a detective, sifting through every document, email, and file she could find. Her first stop was Daniel's study, a room he rarely let her enter during their marriage. It was his domain, filled with shelves of books, awards, and personal mementos. At first glance, it seemed like an ordinary workspace, but Rachel knew better. She had always suspected Daniel kept secrets here, and now she was determined to uncover them. Using a spare key she found hidden in his sock drawer, Rachel unlocked the desk drawers one by one. Inside, she discovered stacks of financial statements, contracts, and handwritten notes. Most of it was mundane: bills, invoices, reminders, but buried beneath the clutter were clues that painted a clearer picture of Daniel's betrayal. One particular folder caught her attention. It was labeled Monroe Enterprises, the name of Rachel's company. Flipping through the pages, she found evidence of embezzlement: large sums of money transferred out of corporate accounts and funneled into offshore holdings. The transactions were cleverly disguised, but Rachel recognized the patterns immediately. Someone had been stealing from her business, and based on the signatures and approvals, it wasn't hard to guess who was behind it. But what shocked Rachel most was not just the theft itself. It was the fact that Daniel had involved Laura. According to the records, Laura had played a key role in executing the transfers, using her position as Daniel's assistant to gain access to sensitive information. Together, they had orchestrated a scheme that drained millions from Rachel's company over the course of several years. Rachel felt a pang of anger mixed with disbelief. How could she have been so blind? For years, she had trusted Daniel to manage their finances while she focused on growing the business. Now she realized he had exploited that trust, treating her wealth as his own personal piggy bank. Determined to dig deeper, Rachel enlisted the help of Emily Carter, her childhood friend and private investigator. Emily listened intently as Rachel explained her findings, nodding sympathetically. "This is big, Rachel," Emily said, flipping through the documents spread across Rachel's dining table. "If we can prove this embezzlement, it'll be enough to put Daniel away for a long time. But we need more than just paperwork. We need witnesses or something concrete tying him to these crimes." "I know," Rachel replied, leaning back in her chair. "That's why I've been thinking, what if I confront Laura directly? She might crack under pressure." Emily raised an eyebrow skeptically. "Are you sure that's wise? Laura's cunning. She won't give anything away unless she feels cornered, and even then she'll try to spin it in her favor." "You're right," Rachel admitted after a moment of thought. "But maybe I don't need her confession. Maybe I just need to rattle her enough to make a mistake." With Emily's cautious approval, Rachel devised a plan. She decided to meet Laura at a local cafe where they often ran into each other casually. Knowing Laura's ego, Rachel figured she wouldn't pass up the chance to gloat, or slip up. The day of their meeting arrived, and Rachel walked into the cafe with confidence. Laura was already seated at a corner table, sipping a latte and scrolling through her phone. When she saw Rachel approach, her eyes widened in surprise. "Rachel," Laura said, forcing a smile. "What are you doing here?" "I came to see you," Rachel replied simply, sliding into the seat across from her. "We need to talk." Laura set her cup down, her expression shifting from curiosity to suspicion. "About what?" "About everything," Rachel said, her voice calm but firm. "About the money Daniel stole from my company, about your role in helping him cover it up, and about the poison you two used to try and kill me." For a split second, Laura looked genuinely panicked. Then just as quickly, she masked her fear with a laugh. "You've lost your mind, haven't you? You really think I'd be stupid enough to admit to something like that?" Rachel leaned forward, her gaze piercing. "I don't expect you to admit anything. I just wanted to remind you that I'm on to you. Whatever game you and Daniel are playing, it's over. I'll make sure of it." Laura's hands trembled slightly as she reached for her coffee cup, betraying her nervousness. "You're bluffing," she said, though her voice lacked conviction. "Am I?" Rachel countered, standing up. "We'll see." As Rachel left the cafe, she couldn't help but feel a small sense of satisfaction. Whether Laura believed her or not didn't matter. The seed of doubt had been planted. If Rachel was lucky, Laura's paranoia would drive her to do something reckless, something that could expose their entire operation. Back at home, Rachel continued her investigation, focusing this time on rebuilding control over her company. Over the years, Daniel had taken charge of many decisions without consulting her, leaving her disconnected from the inner workings of Monroe Enterprises. Determined to reclaim her power, Rachel scheduled meetings with key executives and reviewed every aspect of the business. To her relief, most of the team welcomed her return, eager to support her efforts to restore transparency and integrity to the company. One employee in particular proved invaluable: Mark Ellis, the head of accounting. Mark had noticed discrepancies in the financial reports months ago, but hadn't been able to trace them back to Daniel and Laura due to lack of evidence. "When you disappeared, I knew something wasn't right," Mark confessed during one of their late-night strategy sessions. "But I didn't have proof. Now with what you've uncovered," he trailed off, shaking his head. "We can fix this, Rachel. Together." Rachel smiled gratefully. Having allies like Mark and Emily made her feel less alone in this fight. Still, she knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Daniel and Laura weren't going to go down without a fight, and Rachel needed to stay one step ahead of them at all times. In addition to gathering evidence, Rachel also began laying the groundwork for her revenge. She contacted a lawyer recommended by Emily, providing him with copies of the incriminating emails and financial records she had collected. The lawyer assured her that, with enough preparation, they could build a case strong enough to take both Daniel and Laura to court. But Rachel wanted more than legal justice. She wanted to humiliate them publicly, to expose their treachery in front of everyone who had ever doubted her. To achieve this, she started planning a charity gala, an event designed to celebrate her survival and raise funds for women affected by domestic abuse. Unbeknownst to Daniel and Laura, the gala would also serve another purpose: unveiling their crimes to the world. Rachel sent out invitations to influential figures from high society, including journalists, investors, and lawyers. She ensured that every detail of the event was meticulously planned, from the guest list to the speeches she intended to deliver. As the date of the gala approached, Rachel felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. She knew the stakes were high, but she also knew she couldn't back down now. This was her chance to reclaim her life, her dignity, and her future. Late one evening, as she sat alone in her living room reviewing the final arrangements for the gala, Rachel allowed herself a moment of reflection. She thought about how far she had come since waking up on that cold marble floor. Back then she had been vulnerable, unsure of whether she would survive. Now she was stronger, wiser, and ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Whatever happened next, Rachel vowed never to let anyone manipulate her again. She had fought too hard to get here, and she wasn't about to let anyone take it away from her. The night of the charity gala arrived, and Rachel Monroe stepped into her role as both host and avenger. Dressed in a sleek black gown that hugged her figure perfectly, she greeted guests with a warm smile, making sure to thank each one personally for attending. To anyone watching, she appeared composed and gracious. But beneath the surface, Rachel's mind was racing. Tonight was the culmination of weeks of planning, and she knew exactly how the evening would unfold. The event took place in the grand ballroom of Rachel's estate, transformed into a dazzling spectacle of lights and decorations. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting shimmering reflections on the polished marble floor. Tables draped in white linens lined the edges of the room, adorned with candles and floral arrangements. A string quartet played softly in the background, adding an air of elegance to the proceedings. Among the attendees were influential figures from high society, business leaders, journalists, lawyers, and philanthropists, all invited under the pretense of celebrating Rachel's miraculous survival. What they didn't know was that this gathering was also a trap, a carefully orchestrated plan to expose Daniel and Laura's crimes in front of everyone who mattered. Rachel mingled effortlessly, chatting with guests and posing for photos. She made sure to keep an eye on Daniel and Laura, who had arrived together earlier in the evening. They looked uneasy, glancing around the room as though searching for an escape route. Rachel noticed the way Laura clung to Daniel's arm, her painted nails digging into his sleeve, while Daniel forced polite smiles and avoided direct eye contact with anyone. As the clock struck 8, Rachel took her place at the podium set up, at the front of the room. The chatter died down as all eyes turned to her, waiting expectantly for her speech. Taking a deep breath, Rachel adjusted the microphone and began to speak. "Good evening, everyone," she said, her voice steady and clear. "Thank you all for coming tonight. I can't tell you how much your support means to me during what has been a very difficult time." She paused, letting her words sink in. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd, and Rachel continued. "A few weeks ago, I found myself facing something no one should ever have to endure, an attempt on my life. It was a shocking and painful experience, one that left me questioning everything I thought I knew about trust and loyalty." Rachel's gaze swept over the room, lingering briefly on Daniel and Laura, before moving on. Their expressions were unreadable now, though Rachel could see beads of sweat forming on Daniel's forehead. "At first I wasn't sure what to do," Rachel admitted, her tone softening slightly, "but then I realized that staying silent wouldn't bring justice or closure. So I decided to fight back. With the help of some incredible people, I've uncovered the truth about what happened to me. And tonight, I want to share that truth with all of you." The room fell completely silent, the tension palpable. Even the musicians stopped playing, sensing the gravity of the moment. Rachel reached for a folder resting on the podium and held it up for everyone to see. In this folder are documents, emails, and financial records proving beyond any doubt that my husband, Daniel Monroe, conspired with his mistress, Laura Bennett, to steal from my company and ultimately end my life. These two individuals betrayed not only me but also every single person who trusted them, including many of you here tonight. Gasps erupted throughout the room as guests turned to stare at Daniel and Laura. Some whispered angrily, others simply gawked in disbelief. Daniel stepped forward, his face flushed with panic. "Rachel, please," he pleaded, raising his hands in a gesture of defense. "You don't understand. This isn't true." "Oh, but it is," Rachel countered sharply. "And if you'd like, I can show everyone the evidence right now." With that, she signaled to Mark Ellis, who stood near the side of the room holding a laptop connected to a projector screen. As Mark pressed play, incriminating emails and bank statements flashed onto the screen behind Rachel, detailing every step of Daniel and Laura's scheme. There were messages discussing the poisoning, instructions for laundering money, and even casual remarks about their plans to run away together once Rachel was gone. Laura tried to intervene, her voice trembling as she addressed the crowd. "This is ridiculous. You can't seriously believe these lies." But her protest fell flat. The evidence was undeniable, and the audience knew it. Journalists in attendance began scribbling furiously in their notebooks, snapping photos of the screen and whispering excitedly about the scandal unfolding before them. Daniel, realizing there was no way out, lunged toward the exit, dragging Laura along with him. But security guards hired by Rachel blocked their path, stepping forward to restrain them. "It's over," Rachel said firmly, her voice cutting through the chaos. "You're done." For a long moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, applause broke out among the guests. It started with a few hesitant claps, growing louder and more enthusiastic as others joined in. By the time the sound filled the entire ballroom, Rachel felt a surge of relief wash over her. She had done it. She had exposed the truth and reclaimed her power. After the initial shock wore off, the gala resumed, though the mood had shifted dramatically. Guests mingled animatedly, discussing the scandal and marveling at Rachel's courage. Reporters approached her for interviews, eager to hear her side of the story while friends and colleagues offered their support. As the night drew to a close, Rachel found herself standing alone on the balcony overlooking the estate grounds. The cool breeze brushed against her skin, carrying with it the scent of blooming flowers. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to relax. Emily joined her shortly afterward, handing her a glass of champagne. "You did it," Emily said with a proud smile. "I knew you could." Rachel nodded, sipping the bubbly liquid. "It feels surreal, doesn't it? Like I'm finally free." "You are," Emily replied. "And you deserve every bit of happiness. That comes next." Rachel glanced at Emily, gratitude shining in her eyes. "Thank you for everything. I couldn't have done this without you." As the two women stood there watching the stars twinkle above, Rachel reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She had faced betrayal, fought for justice, and emerged stronger than ever. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew she was ready to face them head on. And for the first time in years, Rachel felt truly alive. In the weeks following the charity gala, Rachel Monroe began rebuilding her life. The scandal surrounding Daniel and Laura dominated headlines for days, with newspapers and television stations dissecting every detail of their crimes. Journalists hailed Rachel as a survivor and a symbol of resilience, praising her courage in exposing the truth. But while the public attention was flattering, Rachel preferred to focus on quieter victories, small steps toward reclaiming her independence and rediscovering who she truly was. The first thing she did was sell the mansion where so many painful memories lingered. It wasn't just the place where Daniel and Laura had plotted against her. It was also a reminder of years spent pretending everything was fine, when deep down, she knew it wasn't. Instead of holding on to the past, Rachel purchased a cozy lakeside home, far removed from the chaos of high society. Nestled among tall trees and overlooking shimmering waters, the house felt like a sanctuary, a fresh start after everything she had endured. Moving into the new house gave Rachel a sense of freedom she hadn't experienced in years. For the first time, she surrounded herself only with things that brought her joy. Comfortable furniture, shelves filled with books, and artwork created by local artists she admired. She spent hours rearranging furniture, painting walls, and decorating each room until it felt truly hers. Every brushstroke, every piece of fabric, every little detail was a testament to her strength and determination to move forward. But it wasn't just about physical changes. Rachel worked hard to rebuild her emotional well-being too. She started seeing a therapist, someone Emily recommended, to help process the trauma of what had happened. At first, opening up about her fears and insecurities felt daunting, but over time Rachel found comfort in being honest with herself. She realized how much of her identity had been tied to pleasing others, first her parents, then Daniel, and now she wanted to live for herself. Rachel threw herself into philanthropy, using her wealth to support causes close to her heart. She established a foundation dedicated to helping women escape abusive relationships and rebuild their lives. Through workshops, counseling services, and financial assistance programs, the foundation became a beacon of hope for countless individuals struggling to break free from toxic situations. Watching its impact grow filled Rachel with a sense of purpose she had never known before. Despite all the progress she made, however, Rachel still struggled with trust. After years of betrayal, not just from Daniel but from others in her circle, it was difficult to let anyone get too close. Friends and colleagues often expressed concern, urging her to give people another chance, but Rachel couldn't shake the fear of being hurt again. That changed when she met Alex Carter, a man unlike anyone she had encountered before. Alex was introduced to her by Emily during one of their casual coffee meetings. He was kind, genuine, and refreshingly straightforward. Unlike Daniel, who had always been calculating and manipulative, Alex wore his heart on his sleeve. There was no pretense or hidden agenda, just honesty and warmth. At first, Rachel kept her distance, unsure of whether she was ready to open herself up to romance again. But Alex didn't push her. Instead, he respected her boundaries, offering friendship without expectations. They bonded over shared interests, books, hiking, cooking, and slowly, Rachel began to feel comfortable around him. One evening, as they sat together on the balcony of Rachel's lakeside home, Alex turned to her and said, "You know, you don't have to figure everything out right away. Healing takes time. Rachel looked at him, surprised by his insight. "I guess I've always been the type to want answers immediately," she admitted. "But lately, I've realized it's okay to take things slow." Alex smiled softly. "Sometimes, slowing down is exactly what we need. You deserve to enjoy this chapter of your life without rushing into anything." His words stayed with her long after their conversation ended. For the first time, Rachel allowed herself to imagine a future where love wasn't tainted by fear or control. With Alex, she felt safe, not because he promised perfection, but because he accepted her flaws and encouraged her growth. Meanwhile, Emily remained Rachel's closest confidant. Together, they celebrated milestones big and small, from the launch of Rachel's foundation to the sale of her old mansion. Emily often joked that Rachel was becoming unstoppable, but beneath the humor was genuine admiration for how far her friend had come. "You've done amazing work," Emily told her one afternoon as they sipped tea on the lakeside dock. "Not just with the foundation, but with yourself. You're stronger than ever." "I couldn't have done it without you," Rachel replied sincerely. "You were there for me when I needed someone most." "And I always will be," Emily said, squeezing her hand. As the months passed, Rachel continued to thrive. Her business flourished under her renewed leadership, thanks in part to Mark Ellis's dedication and expertise. Employees noticed the positive shift in company culture, describing Rachel as approachable, fair, and inspiring. Gone were the days of Daniel's micromanagement and secrecy. Rachel fostered transparency and collaboration, earning loyalty from her team. Evenings at the lake became Rachel's favorite part of the day. Whether she was reading on the balcony, taking long walks along the shore, or simply sitting quietly with a cup of tea, these moments of solitude helped her reflect on how far she had come. She thought about the woman she used to be, the one who stayed silent in the face of red flags, the one who doubted her own worth, and marveled at how much she had grown. Rachel knew scars would remain, both visible and invisible. Betrayal left, marks that couldn't be erased overnight. But instead of letting those scars define her, she chose to see them as reminders of her resilience. Each one represented a lesson learned, a battle fought, and ultimately, a victory earned. One crisp autumn morning, as Rachel stood on the balcony watching the sunrise paint the sky in fiery hues, she felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Gratitude for surviving, for finding allies like Emily and Alex, and for discovering a version of herself she could truly admire. Her journey wasn't perfect, nor was it complete, but for the first time in years, Rachel felt hopeful about the road ahead. Whatever challenges lay in store, she knew she had the strength to face them. And that knowledge, that unwavering belief in herself, was the greatest gift of all. Rachel Monroe stood on the balcony of her lakeside home, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The sky was painted in shades of orange, pink, and gold, casting a warm glow over the tranquil water. It was moments like these that reminded her how far she had come. Just a year ago, she had been trapped in a life filled with lies, betrayal, and fear. Now she felt free to live, love, and dream again. Alex joined her outside, carrying 2 glasses of red wine. He handed one to Rachel and leaned against the railing beside her. For a while, neither of them spoke. They simply enjoyed the quiet beauty of the evening, letting the gentle lapping of the lake waves fill the silence. "You seem happy?" Alex said finally, breaking the stillness. "I am," Rachel replied, taking a sip of her wine. "It's strange, isn't it? After everything I've been through, I never thought I'd feel this way again." Alex nodded thoughtfully. "You deserve it, Rachel. You've worked so hard to rebuild your life. Not everyone could have done what you did." Rachel smiled faintly. She appreciated Alex's words, but she knew her journey wasn't about earning praise or recognition. It was about reclaiming herself, about finding the courage to start over when the world seemed determined to keep her down. Thinking back to the events of the past year, Rachel realized how much she had grown. When she first woke up on that cold marble floor, paralyzed and betrayed, she had no idea how she would survive. But survival wasn't enough. She wanted justice. not just for herself, but for anyone who had ever been taken advantage of by people. Like Daniel and Laura, the charity gala had marked a turning point in her life. Exposing their crimes hadn't just brought closure, it had given her a renewed sense of purpose. Through her foundation, she had helped countless women escape abusive relationships and regain control of their lives. Hearing their stories, seeing their progress filled Rachel with a deep sense of fulfillment. But it wasn't just her professional achievements that mattered. On a personal level, Rachel had learned to trust again, to open her heart without fear of being hurt. Alex had played a big part in that transformation. His patience, kindness, and unwavering support had shown her that not all men were like Daniel. Some, like Alex, genuinely cared about others' happiness and well-being. Their relationship had developed slowly, built on mutual respect and understanding. There were no grand gestures or dramatic declarations, just simple, heartfelt moments that strengthened their bond. Whether it was cooking dinner together, going for walks along the lake, or sitting in comfortable silence as they watched the sunset, every shared experience brought them closer. Emily, too, remained a constant presence in Rachel's life. Though their friendship had always been strong, it had deepened during Rachel's darkest days. Emily had stood by her side through thick and thin, offering advice, encouragement, and laughter when Rachel needed it most. Together, they celebrated victories big and small, from the success of Rachel's foundation to the joy of rediscovering hobbies and passions she had long neglected. One evening, as Rachel and Emily sat by the fireplace flipping through old photo albums, Emily remarked, "You know, I always knew you were strong, but I don't think even you realized just how strong you were until now." Rachel chuckled softly. "I guess adversity has a way of showing us things about ourselves we didn't know before." "It does," Emily agreed. "And look at you now. You're thriving. You've turned pain into power." Rachel nodded, feeling a swell of gratitude. Turning pain into power. That was exactly what she had done. Instead of letting bitterness consume her, she had channeled her anger and hurt into something positive. She had used her experiences to help others, to create change and to build a better future, for herself and for those around her. As winter approached, Rachel embraced the coziness of her lakeside home. She decorated for the holidays, filling the space with twinkling lights, scented candles, and handmade ornaments. Friends and family visited often, drawn by the warmth and hospitality she extended. Even Alex spent more time there, helping her bake cookies, string garlands, and hang stockings by the fire. On Christmas Eve, as snowflakes drifted lazily outside, Rachel hosted a small gathering of loved ones. Emily, Mark Ellis, and a few close friends gathered around the dining table, sharing food, laughter, and stories. Alex sat beside Rachel, his hand resting lightly on hers. Looking around the room at the faces of the people she cared about most, Rachel felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. After dinner, as everyone settled into the living room with cups of hot cocoa, Emily raised her mug in a toast. "To Rachel," she said warmly, "for showing us all what resilience looks like, and for reminding us that no matter how dark things get, there's always light ahead." Everyone clinked their mugs together, echoing the sentiment. Rachel felt tears prick her eyes but blinked them away, smiling instead. "Thank you," she said softly. "But really, I couldn't have done any of this without all of you. You've been my strength when I needed it most." As the night wore on, Rachel excused herself to step outside onto the balcony. Wrapping a blanket around her shoulders, she gazed out at the snowy landscape illuminated by the moonlight. Despite the cold, the scene was breathtakingly beautiful. Alex joined her a moment later, pulling another blanket around himself. "Penny, for your thoughts?" he asked lightly. Rachel hesitated, then said, "I was just thinking about how endings aren't really endings, are they? Sometimes they're just beginnings in disguise." Alex smiled, nodding in agreement. "That's true. And sometimes endings give us the chance to rewrite our stories, to make them better than we ever imagined." Rachel looked at him, her heart swelling with affection. "You're right. This is just the beginning. For me, for us, for everything. They stood there together, wrapped in blankets and each other's presence, watching the snow fall silently around them. The past year had been full of challenges, growth, and healing. But as Rachel looked toward the future, she felt nothing but hope. Whatever lay ahead, she knew she was ready. She had faced her fears, confronted her demons, and emerged stronger than ever. With love, friendship, and purpose guiding her, Rachel Monroe was ready to embrace whatever came next, with courage, grace, and an unshakable belief in herself.